Right, everybody, my next guest is Pablo Fernandez, a coder, manager, maker, author, and entrepreneur who goes by the handle of Popino online. Pablo currently serves as head of engineering for Pexels at Canva. And if you don't know just how big Canva is, we're talking 260 million monthly active users, used by 95% of the Fortune 500, and is valued at 42 billion. And Pablo is leading one of the biggest engineering teams they have. Pablo is also the author of Build and Manage Distributed Systems, and in his spare time, he's been diving deep into AI, machine learning, and tinkering with local LLMs. In these conversations, we explore the evolving role of junior engineers, how AI is reshaping the world of remote work, and best practices Pablo has learned for driving a real mindset shift across the engineering organization. I really hope you enjoy this conversation.
Hey, Sean, thank you very much.
Where do we find you today?
I'm in London. Yeah, home, London. Yeah. You?
How long have you been in London?
I've been saying 12 years for like 5 years, so I kind of got stuck there. No, it's more like 15 years now. Yeah.
15 years. Like,
Yeah.
When I moved to London, I told myself I'm going to be there for a year or 2 years, and I ended up there for 9 years. It's
a really
sucks
cool
you
place.
in. Yeah, it is a really good place.
It's not as cool as it was before the pandemic.
No,
it still hasn't completely recovered.
Right.
But still a cool place. Yeah.
I think, man, the last time we spoke, it was 18 months ago, and you know, the conversation wasn't consumed by all AI back then. Like, we were still trying to figure it out, but like, I feel like in the last, I don't know, 4 months alone, things have just like rapidly accelerated. I'm hearing more on X. I'm hearing more from engineers on how they're using Claude skills, how engineers are against it, how engineers are for it. Like, there's more discussions than ever. Like, what do you think it's down to? Do you think models are getting better? Do you think better advertising? Do you think we're finally accepting that AI is here?
All of the above. I think I see two things. I've been using AI to code, let's say, side projects, sample projects, experiments, things like that, which is where I would say AI does the best for like few years now, and I do see a breakthrough that happened with, like, I think Opus 4.5, GPT 5.2, like those models. Now that they're even becoming better, but at that point, it was surprising. Like, they would one shot big complex experiments, and I think there was a change there. But the other change, I find it really surprising from a managerial point of view, which is people went on holidays for Christmas and got the chance to have a few days of not working, so they started playing with the tools that they were ignoring because they were too busy, and came back with, oh, it can do this and it can do that. And a lot of that is like, yeah, that was true for the last 6 months. And I find it really curious from the managerial point of view, because we shouldn't depend on Christmas for people to progress with their tools, right?
Yeah. It's so funny, right? Our engineers were the exact same, right? Because before Christmas, you're always trying to get deals done. You're trying to get product features out. You're just trying to like finish the year on a high, and then there's that lull. And I think Claude doubled the amount of tokens that you could use, or the consumption cursor did the same. So it was like, here's your little Christmas present to you. You can go wild with AI, explore it. And our engineers came back and they were like, I built all this over the Christmas period with just Cursor or Claude, which was encouraging, right?
Yeah, I've heard the whole I built my retirement project during the Christmas break.
Yeah. Or I built X in 2 hours. Yeah. I've seen a lot of that. How are I know you've been using AI and you've been exploring it, right? From a head of engineering perspective, like, how has your team adopted AI? Because I'm I can see like three buckets, and I kind of use the analogy of like self-driving cars, where there are some engineers that are still hands on the steering wheel. There are some engineers that are still sitting by the steering wheel but letting Tesla drive, and then there are some engineers who are in the back seat and just saying, "Take me wherever." Like, where do you see that at Canva and at Pexels?
Well, at Canva, we have a very strong direction from our CTO that we still own the code, and we are still expected to read all of the code. And we have the culture that it's bad practice to give somebody code to review that you haven't read and reviewed yourself. So nobody at Canva should be in the backseat. And everybody is on the other two buckets. Maybe some people are in the backseat, but technically that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And then there's a massive spectrum. There's people in the I will not touch code again, and there's people that are still like, this is a fad, it will end at any point, and still trying to do it the old way. And I think there's you can clearly see from people's connection to code. Like, some people are coding because they love building something, and some people are coding because they love writing code.
Yeah.
And obviously in those two groups, some people have an easier time getting used to AI or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the purists developers are still clinging on to, like, I really want to write the code, because that's why I became a software engineer, not to become a code monkey, but to fall in love with the code and actually build stuff myself by hand and stuff like that. So I'm seeing it's bringing an interesting dichotomy to their world, right? And there was a good piece by Ivan Surkovic, which is that engineering jobs are actually getting harder because AI allows you to do more. The expectation from management or from board is that, well, we should be producing more features, right? But we still have to write products that work for thousands, 100,000, millions of users and scalable and doesn't break the bank, right? So like, how are you helping engineers adopt AI, but also managing upwards, right? To set expectations that, yes, just because you've given us this tool doesn't mean we're going to like deliver that feature in, we might deliver it a month earlier, but it's not going to be like today.
One of the things that the CEO of Canva said is was do fewer things well, and that is part of our culture. You can, depends on what part of Canva you ask. Some people will tell you no, not really, and in some parts yes. And I am trying to adopt that, but that doesn't mean that I actually think the engineering job, it becomes even harder, because it is not about quantity of code. Like, we could crank up the quantity of code that we're producing with AI, but now we have a lot more demands on engineers that are stopping to be just engineers. Like, we're expecting them to be a little bit of a PM and a little bit of a designer and a little bit of many other jobs. As we discover what the new job is, I think we are inventing a new job. We might still call it engineering. I like what LinkedIn did. They call it full stack builder, and when they do full stack builder, they include like PMing and designing and generating the code or writing the code. And I think we're going in that direction, and it is much harder. You need to know a lot more things, and I think it's one of the things that is really hard for a lot of us is that it's culturally different. A lot of us, me included, got into this because we got along with computers better than with people. And I was like, hey, you need to go and talk to a lot of people, have a lot of stakeholders, and understand that you're not expected to develop more features. You're expected to develop the right feature.
It's and traditionally we've put a lot of separation between engineers and the end user. And I remember at my time at Secure Code Warrior, we were building a product called Sensei, which was an IDE plugin for security. And I had a group of engineers working with me there, and we actually brought them close to like they were sitting down with the end users, like at HSBC or Calibra, and they were like seeing how the engineer was using the software, and then they would immediately then, like an hour later, actually have a bug fix for that, like that focused on the user experience. I think, maybe it's just because we've tried to protect engineers' time, right? Which is the right thing to do, but we've kind of like sheltered them from what actually the customers are saying about the software, using the software, and user experience. So with that whole full stack builder approach, I think what I'm seeing is that the best engineer won't be necessarily the one that understands the code inside out, but be the one that can actually, the soft skills will be as important, and actually link it back to what the business needs are. So that's going to be an exciting shift, a daunting shift for some engineers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, but it is an instance of a bigger thing, which is knowing the domain became a lot more important. And I've seen these sort of, I don't know, meme, not in the funny sense, but in the concept that moves around of AI can do this job but not that job. And they were talking about AI can write a landing page but cannot write firmware, and then everybody got surprised when people use AI to write firmware. And I think what they mean is that what AI doesn't have is the deep domain knowledge that now the engineer needs to have to drive it. And you still need the domain knowledge of the landing page, which might feel very simple code-wise, is converting a visitor into a customer, right? And you still need to have a deep understanding of how should the copy be, like how should the design be, and all of that. And the domain knowledge of writing the firmware is, hey, I have this microcontroller that has only this amount of memory and the pins and all of that, and you have to go and give that information to the AI. And I think because the generation of the code is now faster and easier, the domain knowledge is becoming a lot more critical. And in many cases, the domain knowledge is the end user, right? In some cases, it's not. In some cases, like if you're building a kernel, it's not the end user, I think.
That's an interesting point, and I can see that. I just want to switch gears a small bit, right? Because Canva is one of the rocket ships of the SaaS era, but also one of the rocket ships of the modern AI era, right? I use Canva every day. Like, I love the tools that you guys are building. Yeah, it's great. And I'm by no means a designer, so it's given me some of those superpowers. Now Karim, my co-founder, might disagree with that, but I feel it's making me a better designer. But I saw one of your blogs, your blog posts, right? And maybe a shout out to your blog is was it Pablo Hernandez.tech. It's really good. A lot of thought-provoking stuff there. But you said, like, Canva's feedback culture accelerated your growth as a leader more than anywhere else. Right. And I guess in a world where engineers are getting more feedback from AI tools, Cursor telling that you wrote your code correctly or wrong or whatever, they're kind of existing in this echo chamber. Like, do you think, like, what happens to the human feedback muscle? Does it atrophy or does it get sharper?
That's a good question. I don't think it has a direct impact on what happens to the human feedback, other than I think because we just mentioned that stakeholder management, talking to the users and so on, becomes more important. Having a culture of feedback that allows you to get better at that becomes more important. So I think the companies that embrace that feedback loop of how people work together are going to accelerate compared to the ones that are still thinking that we can grab a problem in isolation and just solve it. And Canva has a we have workshops on how to give feedback, and we have a structure on giving feedback, and it's the structure allows the people that are not used to giving feedback to be able to fill in the blanks. And also when you're on the receiving end, you know, okay, this person is giving me a signal that is important and using this structure that I already understand how it works, so that I can focus on the change that I want to make based on this feedback, and not get hung up on I'm feeling attacked, I'm feeling like we're having an argument, and so on.
Yeah, it's a safe place for everybody to give that feedback. And
Yeah.
so how do you promote that, right? We'll say, especially, you know, there's probably some junior people listening to this, right? Like, how would you help them to think about giving feedback to maybe senior engineers who might know more than them and they might feel intimidated, you know, challenging or giving that feedback? Like, what advice would you give to them?
That's a good question. One of the important things that I think feedback does, so feedback doesn't mean that the person giving the feedback is a higher level figure in any way, or an authority or anything. And this is how I phrase a lot of the time when I give feedback. It's like, I'm going to mirror something to you. This is what I'm seeing that you might not be seeing, and I'm going to mirror. And maybe what I'm seeing is incorrect, and I don't come from a position of correctness. And you can imagine with a junior engineer, like for example, they get very frustrated with the code reviews, and maybe the code reviews are correct and the junior engineer is going to get better. Sometimes we can get snappy in code reviews and create a frustrating experience. So they can go and reflect this, because then for that senior engineer, the having that mirror back to them means that they can grow faster. So it is part of the growth of the junior engineer to give that feedback. And sometimes what I do with somebody that needs help with this is, okay, let's practice. Like just me and a one-on-one, they're going to give feedback to the other person. How are you going to phrase it? Like do the role play, even write it down. Maybe you need to go into the first meeting with like the notes and write it down, because it's very easy to lose track of where you're going. Maybe you need to give it in writing. Maybe you need a third person that is there to sort of smooth things over when you're giving feedback, until you get used to that. There's lots of books about that. Radical Candor is a good one, because I mean, I read that book frequently. They challenge directly but care for the other person. It's such a good way of phrasing how to give feedback for everybody. And to be honest, I don't think, possibly we do have more junior engineers that have more trouble giving feedback because of the power imbalance, but the ability and the fear of giving feedback, it's everywhere. Like it's not, it's hard, and accepting that it's hard, and it's going to be hard to go into those.
Yeah. There's another book I'd like to recommend to people as well, as like Crucial Conversations.
I haven't read that one. Okay, I'll add it to my list.
It's really good, and like I think communication is just such an important skill, and I call it a skill, right? Because you can develop it.
Oh yeah.
You know, and there are some people that just come into the world that have a better way of, they have a better foundation, right? But that doesn't mean that, you know, someone that might not be confident at communicating can build. And I think what I'm hearing is that the first thing you need to do is like establish that baseline of understanding between both parties, right? Like, you know, as you said, mirroring, you know, okay, like this is what I'm seeing, Pablo, right? Are you seeing it the same way, or is there a difference in how you're seeing it? Okay. And then I think in Crucial Conversations, they talk about, okay, what is the objective? Okay, why am I trying to give you this feedback based on what I'm seeing, and how is it going to help you move forward, and being open about that. I know for me, myself, right, as a founder, and I have two other founders, right, like we can get into debates just for the sake of debates, right? Because we want to be right, and like that's not necessarily helping the business move forward. So I'm always in the back of my mind trying to, you know, have a trigger there where it's like, we don't need to debate this. This is just like, how do we both see the same thing from different sides, right? And how we're moving things forward. So it's a skill that everyone needs to develop and needs to spend time on. But I think understanding and reading about Canva, it's deeply ingrained in the culture. I think no one is too good for feedback as well, right?
No, not at all. And we have, Unfortunately, this is one of the cases where it happens, it tends to be private. Because feedback generally if you're giving feedback, most of the times it's of the growth kind, although I try to give both the growth kind and the praise. But we give the praise in public, and then the growth kind, which is so critical, happens a lot of the time in private. And because it happens in private, we cannot use it as examples to show to a lot of people. But having facilitated and having talked to other managers, I know of cases where we had feedback given with people that are like very different, like from junior to head of department at Canva, and the heads of department that changed their behavior. Like when like, oh, I didn't know that this was happening. Good, I'm going to take this signal and I'm going to change. This is what I'm doing, and it had a meaningful impact in the organization, and makes the organization better. This is what we're doing. It makes it better for everybody.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Man, I still have this book. I still have this book, right? So this is Pablo. First time we met, he gave me a copy of his book, which is How to Hire and Manage Remote Teams, and I read it end to end, and a lot of concepts I still use. So when we talk about remote, right, and we talk about AI, like, is it a second unlocking, right? Does AI change like the calculus of remote work? Does it close communication gaps? Does it create new ones? Like, are we seeing more return to the office in favor because we want to like develop skills through osmosis? Or like, how do you see AI impacting remote working positively or maybe not so positively?
That's a good question. My initial reaction is like, I feel these two are completely separate and they're not impacting each other. But I don't know if that's correct. One of the things that I have noticed with AI, this is not unique to AI, but it is the magnitude that is happening with AI. It's quite high compared to everything else. Pretty much every single engineer in my team feels that they are behind in AI, me included, and that everybody else is doing it better and they have nothing to share. And when that happens, nobody's sharing anything. And that means that every person is individually learning the same things and having to do all of the experimentation of figuring things out. And the reality is that we're all behind in some parts because somebody is better than us, but most of us have discovered one trick here, one trick there that somebody else doesn't know. And sharing that, it's critical, because then instead of having like people grow like, oh, this person jump ahead, like everybody starts jumping together with the jump of one person. But that means we need to break through the fear of, I'm going to share something like it feels like a big discovery to me and maybe it's completely based into everybody else, and it feels so uncomfortable to share that. And I think in the office setting, we would learn faster because we see the person next to us, what they're doing, and go, oh, hold on, how do you do that? And we share that, where that sharing doesn't happen as naturally remote. So we need to do a lot more effort for that to happen. And I see it happening very slowly for my taste. And I have the conversation privately with everybody, and I'm constantly blown away by the things that they're discovering and how they're working. And I need to need to share this with everybody. Not everybody knows this part, even though it feels basic to you, which is just adding this one sentence to the prompt causes this to happen. Like, tell everybody about it.
Yeah.
So I do see that being at the office, there's an advantage right now where knowledge sharing became so critical because we're all new to the tool.
And so where, like, is it on Slack channels, or have you dedicated like calls with the team that just goes through like discovery and
yeah, we have a few Slack channels to share the tips and tricks of AI, and also we have regular meetings that came and went, where somebody would show, oh, I built this thing, and share it with everybody else, and how they did it, and so on. And one of the patterns that I've seen is, as I mentioned, it's very hard to get people to present. And even when they present, it's a very sanitized version of the results. I was like, I cannot, like, that was really cool. And then I sit in front of the blank prompt by myself, like, I'm not sure how to replicate it now. And I need to
Right.
go and ask the questions again. And I wish just do it live, like show to everybody what are you prompting, how are you dealing with when it doesn't work, and so on, because that is so valuable. And especially the people that I think are lagging behind are the people that put a couple of prompts, don't get the results, and go like, this is a gimmick, it doesn't give me anything, and they just give up and move on, which I have done at some point, to be honest. Seeing how others face that and push through and break through, that's very valuable. If we just go and say, hey, I wrote this prompt, and it's like iteration number 15 of the prompt, and we don't show all of the bad prompts that came before, and then I one shot to this result, it looks super impressive. It's like, yeah, but show me the 15 prompts, because that's where the learning is.
And do you think that's a symptom of people want to show, okay, I've done this amazing thing with AI in a very short space of time, and they're kind of like, as you said, it's sanitized, right? But they don't want to necessarily share the 15 stupid prompts that got them there, right? Like it's still like you're letting people into your brain a small bit, right? So maybe there's a bit of like, I don't want to disclose this to my colleagues because they might think less of me. There's like a stigma even still with building with AI, right? Do you think that that's a human nature? That's
maybe a little bit, but I don't think so. I think this is natural. I think, like, if you look at the people that are starting a journey into learning any tech, right? At any point they have that breakthrough, that whether it's like they're learning a programming language or a framework, something like that, they have that breakthrough. And some people go and write a blog post about the breakthrough because they're a bit more shameless, and then other people read it, and so on. And most people don't do it. I think we're going through the same thing, but when it comes to learning Python, the world has the full spectrum from the super expert to the super beginner. So the things that we're getting outside in the world is all of the steps that somebody published, because we got somebody that was a super beginner and they wrote like the first step. This is what I did. This is what I've done, even though it was super basic, and they publish it, and somebody else can read it. AI just started, so we don't have the super expert. It's like we're all at the bottom. It's like but it also became available to everybody at the same time. Like, this is super unique. It's like, imagine if computers went from not being available, like 1945 level of nobody even knows what a computer is, to everybody has a computer like year 2010 in the span of 6 months. And we would all be going like, oh, look, I discovered there's a mouse. And the reality is that when it comes with AI, we're all like that right now. There are no experts, right?
And so we went through the transition last year of being a company with deep seeds in building deep tech, right? Which was deterministic. Like, we were down at the kernel level, things were either working or they weren't, right? And like a lot of engineering goes into both scenarios. To flipping, like, the market pulled us in a certain way, and like we were looking at it like, this AI is actually working, right? But we had to flip, and the culture of the engineering team went from, I need to sit down, think about this, like maybe spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours planning, thinking through it, like drawing on the whiteboard before I actually write a line of code. So now AI is the default first step, just to prototype things, right? And to your point about everyone's on the even level, I think it's about the mindset as well. As like, if you have a mindset of, can I do this with AI, and try it, and after 5 minutes, if you can get to that conclusion, yes, I can do this with AI, and continue to do it, great. If you can't, it's about flipping back to maybe your plan B, which is using your brain and your hands a bit more. So it's an interesting dynamic I'm seeing playing out.
Jeffrey Huntley, the creator of Ralph Wiggum.
Yes.
He used to work at Canva.
Right.
And he was the one that opened my eyes.
Yeah.
Because when we started the let's figure out this AI thing in my team, and we started these weekly meetings of everybody to talk about this. We managed to get him to come and give us a demo on the first one, and he came and blew our minds with the demo. And I actually had a few conversations with him, because he went from essentially not knowing what AI essentially was to using it to write compilers in the span of 6 months. So I was like, how did you do it? Because I think I need to traverse a similar path. And he said the single most important thing is to not assume that something is going to fail. Just give it a try and see what happens.
Give it a try and see what happens. Yeah.
And it's like constantly give it a try and see what happens. The prototype now became extremely cheap. You can throw it away. Just give it a try and see what happens. And constantly, no matter how complex it is, no matter like, and there's the idea of this problem cannot be solved because part of this problem is like fetching the data and fetching like this documentation and merging the two. Give it to it. Maybe we'll manage to figure out how to get the data and access the documentation. And many times it happens, and then you learn how to have a lot more impact.
So the art is in previous life, the art was knowing how to start. The art now is becoming knowing when to quit, because like time is so precious, right?
Yeah, and we have to become not emotionally attached with the outputs. Like throw away the prototype. Like the iteration of the creation of the prototype. Like we create a prototype and we throw it away and create another one, because we now learn what the correct prompt should be for the second prototype. There was somebody that actually wrote like, okay, you have to do at least 4 prototypes for everything, because this is what you learn in each of the stages. Like, I don't know if 4 is the magic number. Like, many prototypes.
There's definitely going to be another paper coming out soon about like, you know, something along those lines. You know, one thing that caught my attention last week was the AWS CEO, Matt Garman, and he was in a room of executives, right? And all the executives were giving talks about, oh, I'm using AI to cut jobs. I'm never hiring juniors again. And then he kind of said, he was nodding his head, and he kind of went up on stage and he said that, like, what did he say? He said, like, not hiring junior developers because of AI is one of the dumbest things he's ever
agree.
heard. Yeah. And I was like, finally, a big tech CEO coming out and actually talking the truth, because a lot of CEOs are just pandering to Wall Street, right, and trying to like scrape some ROI from things. But like, now we could get into Wall Street and stock taking and all that, but let's not, because it could be a very long listen. But what's your take on, and maybe let's start with junior engineers. Like, how do you think that's affecting them, and how you're seeing hiring junior engineers evolve, and when we think about roles that AI could potentially take, like, where do you see that going? So let's start with junior devs.
I invite anybody who's thinking about with any juniors anymore to look at the industry of mainframe and COBOL, and what happens when you cut, like, we're not getting new people. And it happened to COBOL because nobody wants to do it anymore, right? But if you do that, then you might be fine for like a decade, but then you start to have this problem where I've seen, like, I consider learning COBOL at some point because they were paying so much money because they have the products, right? And the industry is so broken now, and it's going to become more broken until it disappears. So yeah, we should not do that. I think the challenge that we're facing right now with hiring junior engineers is that normally the junior version of a job is a simplified version of the senior version of the job. Like, the senior is the full version of the job. And then we have simplified versions where we only give them part of the problem and not the hard part. And right now, we don't know what the senior version of this job is anymore. Like, we don't know what the job is. So grabbing something that we don't know what it is and making the junior versions, like, we have no idea. And I think that's one of the challenges that we are having with hiring junior engineers. But I think it's a bit naive to think that junior engineers are not going to figure it out as well, what the job is. And I've heard different things. I've heard junior engineers that are very anti-AI and junior engineers that are very AI natives. And I'm interested, like the ones that are AI natives, like what are the things that they do? How do they behave in ways that, for the ones that have been in the industry for a long time, feels very uncomfortable, and we're dragging our feet and we're taking longer to get there. And you can see that it has happened with other parts of the industry before, like when we switched to simpler, more higher abstraction programming languages, and junior engineers came that care less about the boilerplate and correctness and so on, and started running circles because what was important was the output and not some of the details. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen again. And the companies that realize and figure out how to manage the hiring of the junior engineers right now, they're going to have such a massive advantage. But I think for a while it's going to be hard because there's going to be less jobs because we don't understand how to do
it. In startup land, I hear a lot of CTOs talking about like we're only hiring senior engineers because they think that that's the way that they're going to figure out AI a lot faster.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there's truth in that? Given what you've said, is like we're still figuring out that senior role and shaping that senior role. Like, what advice would you give to a CTO that's just looking to only hire senior engineers right now?
It depends what you mean, what size you mean for a startup. If we're talking about like tens of engineers,
tens of engineers,
I would say this might be a bit controversial. I would say that hiring should have been skewed towards senior engineers before AI, more than the others. And I've seen in startup land to hire junior engineers for the purpose of cutting costs, but it doesn't work very well. The reality is that the startups are super difficult. Like when you're doing a startup, you're building the A team, and by that I mean you're building the team of specialists and commanders that will go to the mission that is completely vague, where we don't know exactly what the objective is and how to get there when the mission starts, and we need to figure out on the way there. To be honest, putting somebody that's junior, even without AI, putting somebody that's junior in that environment, it's a bit unfair to that person. They would need a lot of mentorship there. So I would say bigger companies should be the ones that are hiring more junior engineers because they have that balance of mentorship and they have much more structure than the startup that decides to pivot every other month because they're still trying to figure out what they are, right? We probably can have a little bit more balance, but I think that balance depends a lot on from startup to startup. Right now, I would not go above something like 2 senior engineers per junior engineer on a startup, because it takes time and effort from a senior engineer to mentor that junior engineer.
Yeah. Sound advice. How has hiring changed, right? In the interview process, it's like there's. Have you ever seen the Spider-Man meme where there's one Spider-Man pointing at another Spider-Man? I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Yeah.
It feels like that's hiring at the moment, where we're creating a challenge with AI to challenge how a developer thinks using AI.
Yeah. So I kind of built most of the Pexels team just before AI became so impactful. And now I actually, like, some people move to other teams and I need to hire some new people. So I find myself thinking about it. And I already was on the camp that I want to hire people that have a skill and the basic knowledge, the foundational knowledge, that then they can learn whatever else they need to be able to do the job. And now I'm cranking that up to 11, because it's like Do they even need to know the programming languages that we're using? When I had a front-end engineer that spent 3 days learning our backend language, and then now he's doing backend code, but he's not writing any code. He's using AI. So it's like, what is important now is so different than what it was before. And again, we have the problem that we don't know what the job is. I noticed at Canva, we do have the AI coding interview where you're giving a problem to code. Technically, you can code it with or without AI, but it's impossible to do it in the time allotted without AI. And I don't know. I received the feedbacks to make the hiring decisions. Like I'm part of that group that every now and then does that. And the signals that we get from that interview are so mixed and complicated, and it's hard to extract a lot of high value signals from whether this person it's a good fit for the role or not. So yeah, hiring became harder because of the same thing. It's like, what part is important? So they came in and they vibe code something. Do they understand it? Can they evolve it? Can they do all of these things? So yeah, I think we have to be a lot more experimental with the hiring, and the usual hiring slow, firing fast will become very important as we find out who is good at this new job, right?
And what are your non-negotiables when you're hiring someone?
It depends for what role. The people part for any manager, the people part needs to be really, really good. How they manage conflict, how they realign things with stakeholder, all of that became very important for all the roles. For managers, it went from being an 8 to being an 11. For software engineers, for me personally, I still want the deep understanding of algorithms and data structures, because right now it's even easier to make massive mistakes that will not play well with scale. Like it's so easy to get the prototype to work, but will it work in production when we have like thousands and thousands of queries per second? And you have to have that basic intuition about how software behaves that you get from algorithm analysis. So for me, that's still very important, which is why I don't buy the whole thing of we don't need to learn to code anymore. Because learning to code is not learning the signals. It's learning that. It's learning what's the difference between an O of 1 and O of n and O of n squared and so on. That is the important part of learning to code from my point of view. Yeah.
Gotcha. Nice. I guess the final question or the final segment, right? I call this the missing signal.
Okay.
Where I see people posting on X, I see posting on LinkedIn, I see research papers getting turned out like there's no tomorrow, which can drown people in a lot of noise, right? And it can be very hard to figure out like what is the real signal. And we started AI Builders to help people understand what are the real signals at the coalface, people building with AI. So like, is there any signal that you're observing at Pexels, at Canva, or in your general research that we're missing?
What do you mean by signal? Do you mean like a source of information, or
a source of information, or maybe a ground truth that you've found that maybe no one is really talking about, or no one wants to talk about?
That's a good question. There's so many people talking about so many things. Even to the threats of AI, I don't know. They're very well covered. I just finished reading the book. If anybody build it, everybody dies, which is really interesting about the dangers of AI. I think everybody should read it. That doesn't mean that I am not saying that is the future and we should stop it, but I hope everybody has this information in their head, if at least just to decide how they're going to make decisions and move forward. One thing that I have noticed, I wanted to know how LLMs work. internally. So I ended up learning machine learning, and then discovering that I can apply that work and like building some models for some tasks at work, which are not LLMs, they're small models. And that has changed my mindset a lot in ways that I think are interesting, because I feel like before, the development of software used to be very, very linearly. We used to go from one step to the next one, like trying to make things better, one commit at a time. And now it's a lot more experimental. Like when you're trying to do a model, you don't when you're trying to build a model, train a model, and so on, you cannot, because you don't know which step is the next correct step until you take like 1,000 more steps. You have to become very experimental and separate the signals and test all of those steps. And I can see that starting to appear everywhere in the world of software, when we went from a world, let's call it a Boolean world, where the thing worked or the thing didn't work, and now we're in a more analog world, where we're saying, hey, the precision of this solution is 90% and the recall is 40%, and it's good enough for production, so we're going to production with these, and then we increase one of these numbers, and it became so much more experimental. We can no longer just make the decision on one thing, one unit test passing, and so on. We need to run experiments, and it's no longer linear. We need to isolate the variables of the experiments, and it's not just when building models. When testing the different prototypes, like now it's so easy to do A/B tests that we can A/B test everything because we can build prototypes so quickly. So it's affecting everything. And I think that's a big mindset change of going from that linear Boolean progression to that exploratory analog way of working, which for those of us that like the precision and the yes/no way of computers working can feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's an interesting mindset, and it's almost like linking it back to your product roadmap. It's like we have to do A, B, and C before D is unlocked. Actually, no, maybe there's components you can run concurrently before. Yeah, it is definitely a mindset shift. And us as human beings, we can only think of like there's only so much bandwidth we have to, and everything kind of works. We've been trained in some way to like think sequentially rather than actually run a lot of concurrent thoughts through our mind and articulate them. But yeah, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, at work we had a problem. I cannot give the exact details, but we had a problem where we've been making it better over time, and I think we find a local maximum for that. And then we had to take a step back and run a bunch of experiments, and we knew in advance that not a single one of the experiments was going to be better than the best one that we had already in production. But we had to run all of those experiments because they were all isolating different variables, but also isolating how the variables interacted with each other in production, so that we could understand what are the impacts of these variables isolated, and what are the impacts, how do they mix together, to then pick from that and then run another series of experiments, and maybe another series of experiments, until we find a new solution, which is in a new path that will have a better local maximum that we never reach with the previous path that we were in. And this is very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Great to have you on. I mean, we've went from hiring to building ML to junior developers. This conversation, like always, kind of takes its own path and develops its own roads. Great to have you on, man. All the best. Talk to you soon.
Same here. Same to you.